Welcome to the second summary video on planning and conducting a national level training. The videos were created as part of the Quantiform project that is funded by the European Union and the Swiss State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation. The contents are based on the inputs of a training of trainers that was conducted for national facilitators of the Quantiform project in 2024 in Portugal. In this video you will learn what makes up a good training and what can be pitfalls. You will first learn how to get from objectives of a training to its basic structure, and you will get to know one typical structure of a sequence. You will learn about a so-called training guideline that is a very handy tool for trainers to plan and implement a training. So after the video, you should be able to understand and use the blueprint for a national level training in combination with the supporting documents as a solid base to conduct a national level training. The blueprint and the supporting documents are linked in the description of this video. If you want to learn all about the crucial elements of planning and organizing a successful training and its follow-up, refer to the video of part 1. If you want to learn how to make your training suitable to a specific setting, refer to the short summary video of part 3. The links to these videos can be found in the description of the video. So let's move on to learn about the basic of a good training. The question is here, what is a good training? So if you like, pause the video for a short while and answer this question for yourself before you go on watching. So how do you define a good training, and what are the relevant factors that make the difference between a good and a bad training? The basic of a good training are usually related to the content, the way of delivery, and also the long-term effect that it has in terms of learning, of change of behavior, and so on. So, what does that mean if we talk about relevant contents? First of all, of course, the question is whether the contents are adjusted to the needs of the participants. Are they relevant to their setting, to the region, and even their possibilities? And are the contents actually limited to the essentials, to what really matters? It's hard to believe, but the few and well-chosen contents that will be remembered is often more than a large amount of information that cannot be absorbed by the participants or will be forgotten again very soon. In the same line, the way of delivery has, of course, to be adjusted to your participants. What does that mean? We talk about the cognitive levels and their ease, maybe with writing, reading or learning. Have they been used to being in a school setting, and so on. And then also important matters is group size, the homogeneity of the group in terms of educational background or experience, and how familiar the people are together with each other. Then to increase the long-term effect of your training, you should build on and use the experience and the knowledge or the skills of your participants. You should get your participants actively involved and with that stimulate them to process contents instead of just lecturing to them. And last but not least, help your participants to link what they have just learned to their own situation. Ask them how would they apply it and make them think about it. So it will be much more likely that they will learn from it and actually use what you have taught them. So we have talked about what is a good training. Now, what are possible pitfalls that we tend to fall into? One of them is maybe that we have the wrong participants. That can be the case if we fail to describe the training in a way that makes it clear who should actually be coming. Sometimes it has to do with the selection criteria. Either we use the wrong selection criteria or we don't enforce them enough because maybe we have not, we don't have enough participants, and we kind of have short time to find participants, and we just take whatever is there. Then what can be also the case is that we tend to forget language issues, that we maybe offer training in English or in a national language, and we underestimate the time or the effort needed to translate in maybe regional languages if people are participating from different regions. Maybe the complexity of content is not always adjusted to the clients, or as we have already seen before, we want to put too much into a training and then it becomes too complex and the participants have difficulties to really pick out what is relevant for them at the end. And of course, we have talked about before in terms of good training that we should respect the principles of adult education. And if we don't do that, if we don't base our learnings or our inputs on what people bring with them, their skills, their experiences, if we don't make use of that, often people tend to just run off in their thoughts or don't learn too much. So these would be the typical pitfalls I have been seeing in trainings. I don't know whether you have others. Maybe think about it and let us know in the comments if you have some ideas. How to come now from the training objectives to your training structure. In the rough training outline, you have defined objectives, overall objectives of your training. Now, to come from these objectives to the structure of the actual training, the objectives or these overall goals have to be broken down into different learning goals. So you have the objectives and you break them down into different learning goals. For each of the learning goals, you define what steps or what sequence of steps are needed to reach that learning goal. To do so, to define those steps, ask yourself what actually needs to happen. What do participants need to know? What do they need to experience, to see, or to apply in order to reach that learning goal? Sometimes learning goals are rather big and might have to be broken down into sub-goals or partial goals before coming up with the sequences and steps. But once you have defined the steps, you just have to bring them into a logical order. You'll have lots of steps and you think of a logical order for those steps, and with that you will have like the skeleton of your training structure. So you would have a training structure, sequence 1, step A, B, and maybe F, because they fit together. That makes sense to put them in that order. So please note there is not one correct order of steps, and some steps might contribute to various goals. So be aware, you just have to find your own logic and make it work out for you. So let's look at an example. This was very theoretical. Let's now look at an example. One objective of a training for rural advisors was, for example, the participants will have mastered the most important communication techniques for advisory talks. So that would be that yellow card at the top. Now, if we take this objective as an overall goal, one part of this goal would be mastering the most important communication techniques, and another part is to bring it into the context of advisory skills. So this word would be what we call here the part 1 and 2 of that goal. When you now break down the first partial goal, that leads you to, at one side, the need to get to know different communication topics A, B, and C, then to practice them and to reflect on that practice, to learn from it, and it also leads to the need to be stimulated to try out those techniques in your own daily practice. These sub-goals would then lead to the steps that we maybe first have as one step, an input on the communication techniques, ABC, then an exercise to use one of these techniques to make use of it and experience doing it. Then there would be a step to reflect on that experience, and then there would maybe be a step on ideas on how to actively use that in their daily work. So that would be the transfer. So if we now would do the same for the second partial goal, that is on the right side, you again would end up with quite some steps, and all these steps for one goal could be clubbed and joined together into different sequences, and then you would come up with the skeleton of your training structure. I hope that is clear enough. Now we've talked about these different steps, but in general, any training follows a certain logical structure that you see here presented on the slide. There will be an introduction of the training in terms of stating the program and the goals, and maybe the context of the training. Then follows a moment of familiarization of the participants with each other, depending on the situation, also checking on their expectations. And then usually follows the main block of the training. That means the block that is dealing with the actual training topic, because introduction and personal presentation, that's common to any training. But in this main topic of dealing with the training topic, there you will have this typical structure of the sequences made up of these steps that we have defined before, or we talked about in the last slides. And each of the steps and the sequences is again structured along a similar pattern with 5 steps. We will look at that in the next slide. But after you have usually gone through with your dealing with the subject matter topic, there will be one part also that you go into transfer. You try to lead on your participants to transfer what they have learned into their own practice, as we have also seen before. And often at the end, at the very end of a training, you will have an evaluation giving you feedback on whether your training was useful for the participants, and in case of implementing the same training various times, you will have some feedback on what to improve and how to improve. So this would be a general structure of a training. And then let's now look into the typical structure of one sequence. What you see here is such a typical pattern or structure of a sequence. Any sequence starts with some kind of an opening or an introduction. After that, there will be an element of creating, I call it creating a level playing field for all participants, providing the base for the later dealing with the topic in one way or another. We will see different ways to do that in the next slide. And then after you have dealt with the topic, the results of that dealing activity, whatever it was, will then have to be shared or valued. And then there is, of course, the step or the sequence is closed, and another sequence would start with another introduction. Now, of course, an introduction can be elaborate if it's for a first step of a sequence, or it can also just be a sentence such as, in the next half hour, we will work at the development of the technology. We will look, at the development of the technology in the field of AI, and we'll see what that means for us as agricultural advisors. This simple sentence can also be an introduction. It doesn't need more. So, what you realize, I hope that up to now there is no mention of any methods in this structure. That is because the methods should be the last element to add to your structure of a training. But let's still have now a look at methods, and in this picture you see a list of possible methods that can be used during each of the 5 steps of this typical sequence we have seen before. The choice of the method should be defined by the goal of the step. For example, if the goal of the step dealing with the topic is that participants get a chance to reflect on their own use of a certain technology, individual work is a good method. But if you want them to exchange their experiences about this technology and learn from each other, you will of course go for the discussion in a group. So there is no right or wrong method as such. The method is neutral, but it has to be used for the right goal, or to get to reach the goal that you have planned for that one step you're doing. So that also means that you need to know what is your objective with a certain step. So you have to first define the objective, or we can also call it goal of each step or of a sequence, and only then proceed to choose a method. So please take that along. The method follows the goal. First comes the goal, and then only you choose a method. A tool that has proven very helpful to structure training is so-called facilitation guideline. You see an example here. A facilitation guideline is a table that lists all sequences and steps of a given training with the time, the clock time, the duration, the goal, and then followed in the other columns by the method that you chose, maybe also the person who is in lead in case you have various trainers, and the materials needed. So with one glance, the trainer has all the relevant information for one step together at all times, and that makes it easy in this way to prepare for and to implement the training. I would really advise you to try and start using such a guideline for your planning of trainings. An empty guideline is linked in the description of the video. For the national level trainings, a blueprint was developed as part of the Quantiform project. This blueprint, together with the supporting document, giving alternatives and explaining why things are done the way they are done, are linked in the description of the video, and they provide a good base to implement the national level training on a technical subject in a well-structured and sound way. So download that blueprint and the supporting document and have a look at it, and I'm quite sure you will be able to conduct national level training with that. For any further questions or feedback on the video, don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a lot of fun also and good times with your national level trainings.